Hello, everyone. I'm Sen, a PhD student at Michigan University, a member of Breakthrough Science Society Abroad chapter, and an organizer of India March for Science Abroad. On behalf of India March for Science Abroad, I welcome you all to the webinar on why does India need more funds in education and research. Now, before we start, let me say a few words on India March for Science, or the IMFS. The mission statement of IMFS voices the aspirations of scientists, researchers, science communicators, students, and also the general public at large who have taken part in earlier marches as well, conducted across hundreds of cities and towns around the world, as well as in India. The overwhelming and enthusiastic response of scientists of most countries only points to the fact that almost everywhere science is either being disregarded or undermined. Particularly in India, policymakers pursuing policies that largely ignores scientific evidence. Fake news and narratives is being rampantly spread and propagated by some policymakers at the center and the state level. Unscientific ideas and superstitious beliefs, they are all being spread, and in fact, they have been gathering pace since independence. This is in direct violation of Article 51A of the Constitution. Countries have shown consistent and commendable research output. These countries are actually characterized best significant public investment in research and development and education. These countries spend around 6% of their GDP on education and 3% on science, technology, and research. India, on the other hand, spends miserly 3 and 1% respectively. And this trend has gradually worsened over the years. As a result, a large section of the country's populations remains illiterate. Our college and university systems are railing under acute shortages of infrastructure. Teaching and non-teaching staff are suffering from the severe lack of funds for carrying out research. Science funding agencies like the CSIR and the DST are pushed into acute fund crisis. They are unable to disperse even committed support to the students and to their research projects. Thus, adequate financial support from the government and an inequitable distribution of resource between center of excellence, central universities, and state universities are at dire need to deal. Now, the consistent promotion of unscientific ideas from government crisis circles, reduction of financial support for education in general, and scientific research in particular, and the formulation of governmental policies ignoring evidence-based scientific opinion has steadily increased throughout 2020 and 2020-21, even as public life was disrupted by the COVID pandemic. The Indian Marches for Science revived in 2022 to celebrate the importance of science in society, as well as to jointly urge the Indian government and citizens to uphold Article 51A of the Indian Constitution, to develop scientific temper, humanism, and the spirit of inquiry and reform, and to protect and improve the natural environmental, including forest, lakes, rivers, and wildlife, and to have compassion for living creatures, among others. IMFS strongly denounced the spreading of unscientific beliefs in education, the proliferation of unscientific public policies, the lack of sustainable environmental guardianship, the decline in adequate budgetary allocation to education and research, and the promotion of unscientific research in India. India March for Science 2022 joined the scientific community across the globe to calls for science that upholds the common good and for policymakers for no evidence-based policy in the public interest. To this end, we, scientific community of India, continues to urge central and state government of India for the following demands. That is, stopping the propagation of unscientific and obscurantist ideas and develop scientific temperament in conformity with Article 51A of the Indian Constitution, stopping introduction of unscientific ideas in educational curricula like the National Education Policy 2020 in the name of Indian knowledge systems, and to ensure that the education system does not impart ideas that contradict scientific evidence, allocating at least 10% of the central budget and 30% of state budget to education, spending at least 3% of the country's GDP on scientific, technological, and social science research. And finally, protecting the environment through scientific evidence-backed policies, take effective steps to counter climate change, as well as stopping the rampant exploitation of the country's natural resource for the benefit of a few. Now, undoubtedly, compared to 1947, literacy rates and enrollment in schools and colleges have shot up. Building nuclear plants, sending rockets to Mars, production of vaccines, etc., can be listed as the gains of Indian education system. India becoming the 5th largest economy and home to 3rd largest number of billionaires in the world may also be listed by the ruling elite as gains of the education system. But 75 years after independence, has the nation done well in terms of education which was expected? Now, although we demand an increase in funds for education and research, often we don't have the rationale behind the demand, particularly the facts and figures or the statistics, what the government have spent in last 20 years or so. So in order to justify our demands, today we are having this webinar explaining the statistics of facts and figures regarding the same. Now, I would like to introduce today's speaker, Dr. Manabendra Nath Bera. Dr. Bera is an assistant professor in ISER Mohali, as well as an active member of Breakthrough Science Society. He is also an active member of India March for Science Abroad. Now, this program is live streamed on Facebook, so I request the audience to kindly write your questions there or in the Zoom chat box here. We will take the questions at the end. With this, I request Dr. Bera to start the webinar. Over to you, Dr. Bera.
Thank you, Sivi. Let me just share the slides. I think you can see my slides, right?
Yes.
Yes. Yes. Okay. This is just a minute. Yes. Okay. So thank you, Sivi, for this kind introduction, not just for me, but also for March for Science. And essentially, today's talk will be to give you some rationale behind this very particular demand, that why we need more funds for education and research. Okay, and this particular demand that we essentially utter is that India is rich enough to allocate more funds for education and research. And in particular, the country should allocate at least 10% of central budget and 30% of state budget to education, and spend at least 3% of country's GDP on scientific, technological, and social science research. And this particular talk has been designed to actually justify this demand, and particularly to find out the rationale. And in order to do so, what I shall be actually taking up, in fact, I will try to be as exhaustive as I can, although there will be time constraints. So I will flash on some things, I'll skipping some parts, obviously. But in case you have some more questions, let's say, that are left at the end, I can also take up. So here is the outline. So first I will take up the state of school education, that means the condition that we are having now, the state of the higher education, and then I shall go towards the state of funding in education. All these things I shall be discussing with facts and figure, obviously. And before I end, I shall also explore the economic viability, in particularly the policy orientation that we have. Okay, and then we will conclude with our demands that is coming from March for Science as well as Breakthrough Science Society. So let me start with the state of school education. So whenever I talk about, let's say, the state of school education, I shall be taking up like what is the situation in terms of government and private schools, the infrastructure, the condition of teachers, and then the student-teacher ratio, quality of learning, etc. Okay, so let me start with the government versus private schools. So in total, in our country, we have 15 lakh schools, and there are about 1 crore teacher. As you see, it's approximately 96 lakhs. And total number of students at a time in schools, that means primary, secondary, and high schools, are approximately 25 crores. And among these schools, there are 84% of them are situating at the rural areas. And now if I just look at that, out of these schools, there are almost, as you can see, the schools, there are almost 4 lakh schools that are private, which are having almost 38.5 lakhs of teachers, and it caters almost 9.5 crores of students. That is almost about 38%. And if you look at this particular thing in this table here, you will see it almost caters like something around, you see these figures here. And from that, you can easily figure out that the school education in the country is almost privatized up at least something more than 30% of total schools. Okay, so this is essentially the figure. Now I shall just give me a moment. There is some floating. Yeah, so now I shall go towards the situation of primary and secondary schools. As we know that we have primary schools and secondary schools, and in general, there are more number of primary schools compared to secondary schools, but this obviously not the very good picture in general. There should be a very good proportion between the primary and secondary schools. And as we see that all India ratio says that for every approximately 5 primary schools, there are 1 secondary schools. And this figure actually worsen, for example, in case of Bihar, where I have 13 primary schools compared to for 1 secondary school compared to the national average. So that already indicates that in general in India, we need more secondary schools. So I'm just giving you the picture of the schools so that I can justify that why I need more funds. So I start with this particular thing. The second thing is essentially the buildings. And it is, just a minute, so many cursor thing coming up. So the infrastructure, it actually says that if we consider this almost 15 lakh schools, out of 6,000, almost 465 schools do not have even buildings. And in fact, there is a statistics that is coming from 2009 and 10. It says that the government schools, almost 20% of them are not pakka. Pakka means it is not brick made. Okay. And if you go for the private, these pictures essentially kind of gives you, this histogram gives you the picture. So that means there are schools which are not yet solid enough to safely function as a school. And now if you go look to this particular thing where how many students you have per classroom, then you see that there are states like Bihar where every classroom on an average caters 78 students. So obviously that is not something healthy for any education system. That immediately indicates that we need, even though we have schools, but these schools need more classrooms. Now, if you go towards the infrastructure, it says that at least our 2017 data says that there are only 68% schools that are having toilets and that are having toilets that are usable. Essentially, what I wanted to say is that there are toilets in the government schools, but out of which 68% toilets are usable. And you see here the usable boys toilets in different states and usable girls toilets in different states. So that means again that in order to maintain hygiene and this toilet system, we need also some improvement. And here is the statistics of drinking water facility. So that means almost 30,000 schools do not have drinking water facility. Only 10% schools do not have even hand wash facility. 40% schools do not have playground and 43% do not have boundary walls. And the children with special need, obviously, in our school system, we don't have very good situation for them in a sense, like 79% of schools do not have functional children with special need friendly toilets, and 43% or 43.73% schools do not have ramps with handrails. And on the other side, this health checkup, which are to be done through the school, are also not done very frequently, as you can see here, this figure. And what about the libraries? It's essentially says that across the country, only 16% of the school do not have library facility. And whatever the libraries they have, that also only have 69.4% of the school's library have any books. So that means all the 16% school don't have libraries. So rest of the schools have libraries, but out of which only, let's say, approximately 70% schools have books. So that means 30% don't have books. And here you see the figures. And this is a report coming from UNESCO 2021. Electricity. So 22.66% of government school, 15.77% of government aided schools, and 10.77% private school across the country do not have functional electricity connection. And computer, whopping almost 9 lakh schools do not have any functional computer facility. While we are talking about so much of digitalization of education, and this is the situation. And this figure, this situation is even further worsened if you consider the internet situation. A whopping 11 lakh, approximately, let's say 12 lakh schools across India do not have internet facility. And what about science laboratories? Actually, the situation is no good there too. 75% of schools do not have science labs for class 11 and 12. And 58% of schools do not have science lab for class 9 and 10. And just think about the situation, and that kind of indicates the situation of the science education in the country. Okay, so this is essentially, and now if I sum up, this is what you have. You have total number of schools that are approximately 15.5 lakh. Okay, and then this is the drinking water facility you have, this is the boys toilet facilities you have, and so on and so forth. And classroom condition, that means whether it is safe or having spacious, having enough space to accommodate a large number of students. If you consider in that sense, the condition of the classrooms are not really good, and that is only 65% of the schools that have some reasonable condition. And what about the working condition of the schools? That is also is kind of shown here in this table. This is again the total number of school. And see, this is essentially, you have the library, only 66% school have libraries, and then internet facility has only 19% of the schools have internet facility, and so. Okay, so this is essentially kind of a sum up. Now I shall go towards the situation of the teachers, because teachers are essential for this teaching and learning process that are going on in the schools. And obviously their condition does affect this education system. Once again, to remind you, there are 15 lakh schools, and teachers are something approximately to 1 crore, and the students are 25 crores. And now let me look at again the situation of the condition of the teachers in the government school, and that is again coming from UNESCO report. And it says that there are teachers having less than 3-year contract. If you count them, it goes more than 37%. So that means 37% of the teachers are contractual. When I say contractual, I only consider having contract less than 3 years. There are also schools that are having contract less than 5 years, and that are not considered here. So if you add this number, obviously this 37% will go up to at least 50%. Okay, so that is the situation of teachers, just to say, in the government schools. If you go to the private schools, this figure even goes up drastically. There are 82% of total private teachers in the private schools are contractual. Once again, when I say contractual, the contract is less than 3 years. Okay, and if you now sum up like private and government together, there are more than 52% of teachers having contractual positions. Just a minute, this cursor is disturbing me. Okay, so this is the situation of the teachers. And now if I look at the schools, also there are 7.25% schools. Remember, there are 15 lakh schools, out of which 7.2% schools, they are run by single teacher. And this number is not really small. And out of these single teacher schools, 89% of them are there in the rural areas. So, and if you look at the need of the teacher, that means there are need of teachers in the schools, but the positions are not filled. If you look at it, it is something goes around 11 lakh. So you see the situation of the schools. And now if I sum up all of them together, again, it is coming from this UNESCO report, you see this single teacher school, here is something goes around 1,10,971. So that many schools have only one teacher. And if you look at the vacancy, it is going to something like 11 lakh, as I had mentioned earlier. In case, obviously, I understand there are too many information in these slides, but I will request you, in case you really want to go through them, I request you to go through the recording that is happening on YouTube later on. Or if you have some question, I will come back to that. Now let me look at the student-teacher ratio. Traditionally, it is called the pupil-teacher ratio, PTR. And it says that this PTR at secondary school is something around 47.1%. While the Right to Education Act says that the student-teacher ratio or this pupil-teacher ratio should be something around 30.1. And this is the situation, as you see, for primary school, primary only schools, 22% of them have PTR greater than 30.1, and 78% schools have more PTR. That means more than this 30:1. And on the whole, the secondary and senior secondary schools have PTR something between 43:1 and 47:1 respectively. So that means the student-teacher ratio is also not up to the mark, and that too after considering this more than 52% of contractual teachers. So this is the situation in the school. And if you look at the quality of learning, that is also something very disturbing. So this the National Achievement Survey in 2017 observed that 53% of class 3 students can only solve problems that are simple logic just by applying simple rules, following simple instruction, etc. Only 53%. And this number goes down further if you go to the higher classes, something like only 47% of the students in class 5 can solve some basic problems of their standard. And for class 8, it is only 39%. If you look at this quality learning further, there is this ASER report, ASER report in 20 and 21. It says that if you look at the students at different standard, like class 2, 3, 7, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and you look at how many of them can read at least a text that is of standard 2 level, only story, and it finds this number. This is the percentage. So in class 3, only 20% can read class 2 simple textbook, and in class 8, only 69%. So that means that is the proficiency of learning, that is what we observe in the school education. And the situation of this teaching and learning process is so horrible that much of the students actually have to rely on the private tuition. And this is the picture that you have here. It says that there is an increase in proportion of children taking private tuition classes. All together, if you look, that is something of the form of like approximately 39%. You remember the number of students is 25 crore. And this is almost approximately 40%. And if you look at the government school, the figure does not help you much. So that means the percent of enrolled children who take tuition by school type, you see, this is the government school. 39.5% students take private tuition. And in fact, the annual status of education report, that is this ASER report, 2018 data shows that all India private school enrollment increased from 18% to approximately 31% from 2006 to 2018. So that also kind of says the situation of the government schools, in particular, the quality of learning is deteriorating so fast, so that the parents, the students are now choosing for private schools and leaving the government schools. So this is the situation. And now if I look at, excuse me, I'm sorry, I'm having a little bit of a cold. Now, if I look at the dropout, you can see that, so this is again, you could see that in the primary level, the enrollment ratio is something almost around 100%. There are a little bit more than 100%, but this counting is done with respect to how many students are getting in class or in the primary level, given the age group. Sometimes little bit aged or underage student also get admission, and that is why it goes a little bit more than 100. But what I want to show here is that if you start from this primary level to higher secondary level, there are almost 50% dropout. So that means if 100 students starts in the private school, only 50 reaches class 12. Think about it. That means if 25 crore students are there, out of which only 12.5 crore will even think of completing, or at least will be able to complete their 10+2 level. So this is the situation. And now there are also surveys to find out what is the major reason behind this dropping out. And obviously one of the major contribution, at least according to their survey, it says that child not interested in studies. And now this question would immediately arise, that why the children are not interested in studies? Is it not the failure of your school system? Apart from that, there are also financial constraints, and that is obviously one of the reasons, because the education is really costly, as I will come to in the following slides. But what I want to highlight here is that at least among the female students, there are 13.9% dropouts because of marriage. This is also a very sorry state of affairs that we are actually experiencing through. And so this is essentially the reason they want to highlight, but at the end it points to this school education system itself, particularly its failure. And now, if I now sum up that in the school education system, what did we see? The need of the hour is essentially we need more schools, more classrooms, better toilet facilities, sanitation, hygiene, better drinking water facility, electricity, computer, internet, libraries, and science labs. See, all these are basic things that one needs to run a school education system. Also, to have a more people teacher, or let's say lower people teacher ratio, that means having more teachers corresponding to number of students. Because of that, we need more teachers also, and with permanent contract, because the moment you have contractual positions, they have been overexploited in such an extent that they're not very much interested in teaching, and that is something surprising. And at the same time, you need to have improvement in quality of learning process and need to reduce the dropouts. Obviously, for that, you need to have more and more scholarship. As you can see, financial reason is one of the reasons for these dropouts. So that means you need to have financial assistance, and that is nothing but the scholarship on the school level. And obviously, as I have mentioned, you have to stop privatization of school education. Now I shall go towards the situation of this higher education. And once again, I will start with this picture, particularly what is the situation of government versus private. So when I say higher education, I actually mean that there's undergraduate and postgraduate courses, doctoral degrees following 10+2 year of education, schooling, or the school education. And mostly these center of higher educations are central universities, state universities, private university, all institutes or universities that is beyond this 10+2 school level, essentially. And now if I look very carefully, how many universities are there in the country? Well, at least this AISHE report says that there are something around 1,043 universities in the country. And out of which 396 universities are private. Just think about it, something around 40%. And the picture is even surprising. Let me come to the number of colleges and how many of them are private. So as I have mentioned, this is the number of total universities. Excuse me. The total universities and the number of colleges are something around 42,000. And the total number of teachers, this teacher means college teacher, university teachers, this is something around 15 lakh. And it says that out of this many colleges, 42,343 colleges, 78.6% colleges are privately managed. Just think about it. And the figures, you can go into more details, obviously. For example, in Andhra Pradesh and Telangana, there are approximately 80% colleges that are private colleges. In Uttar Pradesh, it is 78.5%. And now think, most of the students that they go out, obviously from 10+2 level, will go to the college. And this is what is the situation. In fact, in total, if you look very carefully, there are private colleges that cater 66.3% of total enrollment. If you combine all these things together, more than 70% of higher education is privatized. If you look here carefully a little bit, state private university, and this is the enrollment, you see this, there is an increase, consistent increase in enrollment, both for state private university and deemed university. So that means you see the government universities are somehow declining in terms of enrollment, while the private universities are actually increasing its enrollment, because most of these private colleges are associated with these private universities. So this is the situation of higher education. Now, if you look at the gross enrollment, so the moment I say gross enrollment, it means how many students are taking enrollment in this, let's say in the colleges, or let's say education beyond 10+2 level. And it turns out it is something around 27.10%. So that means if 100 students starts in the primary level, only 27 of them taking admission in the colleges. So that means this is approximately 73% dropout. Think about it. While our national education policy aims to increase this gross enrollment ratio in higher education to be 50% by 2035, but given the situation we have, this is very much unlikely. And if you now compare with different states having this GER, that is this gross enrollment ratio, like Bihar has only 14.5%, but out of 100, only 14.5 students take admissions in the colleges. And this is the picture. And if you consider with the developed countries, and this is the picture you see, in USA it is 86% enrollment. In Germany it is 68, and so on. So this is the situation. Now, if you look at the situation of faculty shortage, and this is what is the news I have for premier institutes, for example, IITs, NITs, ISERs, IIMs, and so on. And it shows that this is a report, I think it's coming from 2020. It says that there are 39,000 vacancies. And many of these institutes, central universities, state universities, are essentially managed by contractual, ad hoc, and part-time lecturers. So this is the situation. And now if I look at the cost of education, higher education in particular, if you look carefully, the cost of education, you look here, this is a news coming from 2020 only, 2022 only. It says that this is the hostel price. And now here on the left, here you can see the cost of higher education. If you go for law, it is approximately 40,000, management approximately 60, IT 60, engineering 63, medicine and something. But again, if you go into like, it's kind of an average expenditure. If you go for IITs, for example, this Indian Institute of Technology, Kharagpur, they have increased Their annual cost from 90,000 to 2 lakhs, while 85% of Indian populace practically are poor, with an income below 10,000 per month. Think about it. Will they be able to afford this higher education in these institutes? And now I also will give you a very quick picture, although this is incomplete. For example, how this tuition fee or the semester fee increases since 2014. And this is a figure again only up to 2016. And you see how much it is increasing. Now it has been almost doubled. In many cases, it's even tripled. And this is the tuition fee of ISER, National Institutes. This is, for example, for ISERs, BSMS. And you see how it got increased. And that is till 2019. So if you now count all these things together, you will be surprised that this price even hiked much more than what I show here. So this is and this is the question: can people really afford such a high amount? And quality of education, if you go, it says that only 2.5% of colleges in the country run PhD programs. And best colleges in the country are concentrated in 9 of India's 28 states. So that means it's not even equally sparse. And if you look at the quality of education, obviously we need to have some parameter. And here I took help of this QS World University Rankings. And it says that the best institute that we have in India is IISc Bangalore, and it ranked only 155 in 2023. This is the situation. If you compare with others, you can see it on the right. And I'm talking about the best institute of the country. And now, if you look at the quality of education and research in particular, how many researchers are there per million people? When I say million, it means 10 lakhs. While Germany has 5,212, India only contributes to 253 out of 10 lakhs. A total of 1,69,170 students are enrolled in PhD program, which is very little, even less than 0.5% of total student enrollment. You are talking about research or higher education, essentially. Now, if you look at the share of global scientific publication, you see this is the share. In 2016, the data I have is only till 2016, and I believe it did not change drastically much to 2022, and till 2016, it is just 4.1%. That means it needs to improve in terms of the quality of research output in particular, and India lags considerably in this parameter when compared to other developed countries such as USA or developing countries like China. And patent, if you can compare, you see where India actually marks here. It's only 28,000, where China is having something of the order of 5 lakhs. And one of the reasons, as highlighted in this particular report, it says that one of the key reasons for relatively low patents in India is due to low expenditure in R&D. And now let me talk about this brain drain. We know that the Indian students, in particularly the brighter section of these students, they fly abroad for a better education. And this is the figure. In 2019, there were something approximately 6 lakh students that left the country for better education and living condition too. In 2021, in the middle of COVID pandemic, there were something around 4.5 lakh students that left the country. And till June in this year, 2022, you see, this is almost 2.5 lakh students that left the country. And the reason obviously is obvious. The higher education is so terribly lacking in terms of quality and so, that the students find better options in terms of education abroad, and that's why they leave. So that means, what is the need of the hour? We need more colleges and universities with better infrastructure, with higher learning and research. Need more lecturers and faculty with permanent contract. Need to reduce dropouts, more scholarship for higher education because it's very costly. Need a qualitative improvement in learning processes and research, obviously, and need to establish or improve the institutes and universities with a reasonable qualities in research, so that we can reduce this brain drain. And need to make higher education completely free of cost and no privatization for education. Now I shall go towards the state of funding. And in particular, I will divide these in three parts. One is the state contribution. That means the state like West Bengal, Kerala, the state, how much they contribute to this education. Then I will highlight the contribution that is coming from the central government, and as well as the recommendation by different committees. And let me start with that, the state contribution. Just a minute. So here you kind of see a color chart, and these different colors actually represent this one. What it says, the state's education budget as % of total state budget. Let me tell you, approximately the state budgets are of the order of 1 lakh crore every year. And here is the percentage. As you can see, this red one is up to 10% of their state budget. Above 20% is essentially that is only taking place in Delhi. This is above 20% of the state budget. Let me go a little bit more in details. So this is where this Uttar Pradesh lies. It is below 15% of their state contribution, state budget. That means they allocate below 15% of their state budget in education. And this is the Madhya Pradesh, the picture of Madhya Pradesh, Jharkhand, Delhi, Bihar. But what I would like to highlight here is that Kerala, having a state known for more percentage of literacy and so, it spends actually much less. It is below 17% of its state budget. And now let me go towards the central contribution. Here, as you can see, the figures, this is in crores. And as you can see in 2023, the budget estimate of this budget estimate for allocation of education of funding in education is something of the order of 1,04,277 crore rupees. And you see this trend essentially. Here you will see this right figure, or this histogram kind of tells you what is the percent of union budget being spent and the percent of GDP. And as you can see in 2020, 22 and 23 years, only 2.64% of the total central budget has been allocated for education. And this is 0.4% is essentially the percentage of GDP. The same figure, but you express in percentage of GDP. And here, as you can see, this is exactly the point I have written. And now, if you look very carefully, that having this total 1 lakh crore, how they had divided, they divided almost equally or exactly equally for school education and higher education. Okay, so these are the numbers that I would like to show. And now if you compare with other countries where India stands, you see, Brazil spends, this is obviously in percentage of GDP, Brazil spends something of the form of 6.3, while India is 3.5. Although these figures are counted in different way, and there are different sources essentially say differently. But what I wanted to say, even if you compare with respect to Brazil, which is a developing country, we are almost half of it. Although I believe GDP does not reflect the exact number that is being invested in higher education. But still, this is a figure to compare. And how much of investment that we have in research in particular, whether it is coming from the government or the private sector, This is the figure. It's only in the research and innovation. The investment is of the order of 0.69% of GDP. You see, this is the trend on the right figure. And if you compare, this is the expenditure for India in different years. And if you compare this R&D expenditure in India with other countries, you see India is here. While South Korea spends something of the order of 4.6% of its GDP in R&D, India spends something of the order of 0.7%. Okay, so this is the situation. As this National Education Policy 2020 recognizes that, it says that unfortunately, this is what I have written here, is exactly the sentences that are mentioned in this National Education Policy. It says, unfortunately, public expenditure on education in India has not come close to the recommended level of 6% of GDP, as envisaged by the 1968 policy, reiterated in the policy of 1986, and which was further reaffirmed in the 1992 review of the policy. The current public government, that means center plus state, expenditure on education in India has been around 4.43% of GDP, and only around 10% of the total government spending. That means again center and states towards education. These numbers are far smaller than most developed and developing countries. So this is actually noted by this National Policy of Education 2020. And after that, we have already 2 more budgets, central budgets and state budgets. And we don't see any trend in the sense which can justify that government really wants to come close to this recommended level, recommended figure, which is 6% of GDP. Anyway, so let me now go towards the economic viability, in particular the policy orientation. Because whenever we talk about education system and we ask for more money, the question immediately comes, is India really in a position to spend more money for education? Because it's a poor country. And so forth. There are so many counter arguments people come up with. And here I would like to see to what extent this is true. And let me start with this. What is the total central budget of 22-23, the year 22-23? It is of the order of 40 lakh crore. This is the budget that are passed in the parliament. And here you can kind of see how this number, that is this 40 lakh, approximately 39.5 lakh being divided. And I have highlighted here the allocation in defense, that means in military, and allocation of education. If you look, this is almost of the order of 5 times difference. That means defense gets something of the order of 5 lakh crore, education only gets 1 lakh crore. And the trend has always been like this actually. As we sometimes get to hear that in today's time, the economy is essentially called war economy, militarization of economy. And that obviously true if you look at this, the budget spending. The maximum share of this military actually goes to this military, and that is of the order of 15%. You look, this is the trend. While this trace, the line, says the expenditure percentage of central government expenditure, that means percent of total budget that are being spent in military and defense. And this is the number. And if you look very carefully here, this is the figure coming from 2020. India is the 3rd country in the list to spend that much amount of money in military. It's even more than Russia and UK. So this is a common cartoon, we know. Every time when you ask for money, in particular for healthcare, education, science, or any other public service sector, you will always get to hear that there is no money. But if you look at the defense, the military, you will always see there are never a problem with money. They are always having more than what they need in general. In any case, this is a cartoon which essentially depicts, or I would say, capture the very essence of the situation that we are having nowadays. And with this, I would like to divert a bit and tell you something, that whenever we talk about this budget and this budgetary allocation, one thing is never incorporated. That is called revenue forgone. This is a huge amount of money that are not taken into this budgetary allocation or these facts and figures, but are essentially gifted to the big industrialists. And how they are gifted, in which way? This is what you can see here. If you look at this, this is called revenue forgone. They are also known in different way. They call it bad loan. Sometimes they call it non-performing assets, and so on and so forth. But these things are essentially gifted away to these capitalists or these corporates in many different ways. First, they will waive the corporate tax. There are many different, for example, you see that there are custom duties. For example, big companies, corporates, they often import things from abroad, and for that they need to pay some tax. But they will be waived of this tax. Excise duties. There are big industries. They need to pay some tax to do business within the country, but they don't need to pay. And at the same time, this corporate income tax and all these things are essentially gifted away, waived. And in that way, a huge amount of money every year you essentially give or gift to the capitalist. And here is the figure. If you look, this number, it's unprecedented. In 2014 and 15, this number, that means the amount of money that have been waived or given away to the corporates are more than 5 lakh. On that very year, if you look at the education budget, it was something of the order of 60,000 crore. Just compare the number. And now, after 2015 and 16, suddenly we see there is a change in this bad loan which have been waived for the corporates. But don't be fooled by that, because they are smarter than you, in the sense they have changed the way of calculating this bad loan. Otherwise, this number, the trend, as you can see, this number is actually going high. And now, in this context, I would like to recall two very important events that happened in Indian economy. One is called demonetization, another is called GST. You see, this is exactly the time where you see this demonetization, because such a huge amount of money that are gifted away to these corporates, obviously from where? From the banks only. Banks are getting dry. What do you need for that? To counter it, go for demonetization. People will again pour in money in the bank. It will work. Anyway, this is a different question altogether. But I just want to bring this thing in your notice that it has a very strong correlation with this revenue forgone. So that means we kind of see that we give away money to the corporates. And one of the justification for that often comes that, well, that is necessary because these corporates only create jobs, make our country rich. So that means you need to obviously give some incentives, some tax waiving to the corporates. So this is one argument. Another side, whenever you ask for money for education, they say that India is poor. Now I would like to carefully scrutinize whether these two statements are correct. And I will start with this thing, whether India is poor or not. I will start here. If you look very carefully, at this very moment, India is the 5th largest economy. 5th largest economy in this world. And now, if you look how much income, that means when I say 5th largest economy, based on what? Based on GDP, gross domestic production. And if you look very carefully, the average per capita income Average per capita income means that if I have that much amount of GDP, if I divide it with total number of citizens, per person, how much GDP is there? That is called per capita. That is of the order of something $2,515. This is in dollar. But if you adjust it with the purchasing power parity, that means with this dollar, how much material I can buy in the country, and compare it with USA, where mostly the dollar is there, it is of the order of 8,358 per year. And if you now convert it in rupees, it says that in India, every single citizen create that much amount of wealth every month. So that means, if I say in that sense, every person in India on an average earn 56,700 rupees per month. Look at the number. But obviously this question is that where this money is going? This money is actually going to the corporates through organized loot and plunder using the state machinery. It's a surprising figure. Now, if you look very carefully further, if you say the India is poor, look at the wealth, how it is being distributed. What does it tell us in order to understand the policy orientation? It says that the top 1% share of population groups in total wealth from 1961 to 2020, top 1% in 2020 shares 42% of country's wealth. Top 10% shares 74.3% country's wealth. And now if you look at the bottom 50%, in 1961, bottom 50% shared 12% of country's wealth. And in 2020, it is only 2.8%. Think this thing. That means richer people getting richer and richer. Poorer people are getting poorer and poorer. And now you talk about job creation, because you are giving away money to the corporates and saying that, well, this is necessary because you need to create job for the people. If you look very carefully, that 90% of Indian population cannot earn 25,000 per month. Even if you look little more closely, you will see that in all India level, 52.2% people are self-employed. It is not directly getting a job from the corporates. No. Only 22.8% people have regular wage and salary. That too, out of which this total 71.1% people do not have regular benefits. That is what the job creation you are talking about, just by giving away that much of money to the corporates. And now, if you look at the situation of the people, it says that in Global Hunger Index, in 2021, India slips to 101 position, which is even below Pakistan and Bangladesh. More than 56 crore people, that is of the order of 40.6% of the population, suffer from moderate to severe food insecurity. You look at the figures here. These are all coming from some survey or some reputed newspaper which you can rely. And on the other side, what we see, that the food subsidy has been curtailed almost to the half, or even more than half, from 2020 to 2022. Petroleum subsidy has been reduced from 38,000 crore to only 5,800 crores. This is the situation. So India is obviously rich. It is the policy orientation. And again, you can see that this is reflected in this figure that I am going to show, that in 2021, in the middle of COVID pandemic, these gentlemen, these corporates, they were earning, this is a daily earning they had. Every day they were earning that much crore rupees. In fact, Adani now became the third richest in the world. The wealth of India's 10 richest corporates have enough money to fund school and higher education for 25 years. Think about the money. So India is not poor. Don't talk about this thing. You don't want these people to get educated. Essentially, this is what it is, that India is sufficiently rich enough. Unfortunately, the wealth the people all together create are do not reach to these common people, are usurped by this handful of corporates. And the economic policies are oriented just to favor the corporates and to maximize their profit. And to garner more profit, these corporates want their entire education system. These corporates want the entire education system of the country to be privatized and under their control. And in order to do that, what they're doing, in the first step, they will scramble and destroy the existing infrastructure and quality of public education from within, from inside itself. And in parallel, they will come up with this private institution to entirely privatize the education system. And it is not my own thinking. Let me show you that this is a recommendation coming from a report headed by some, you probably know these names, Mukesh Ambani and Aditya Birla. It's such a surprising and shame at the same time. In 2000, the government is appointing Mukesh Ambani and Aditya Birla, inviting them to form a committee and to frame a policy for education. Wow, in this country, we did not have an educationist to come up with an education policy. And look at what was their recommendation. They said that user pay principle to be enforced strictly for higher education supported by loan scheme. So government does not need to pay. Rather, the students should go to the bank and take loan for their own education. Allow foreign direct investment. Legislate private university bill to encourage the establishment of new private universities in the field of science and technology, management and finance areas. The education learning, the syllabus, all these things should be market oriented. Financial assistance provided to the university should be cut, and they should be taken to self-dependence. The moment you say self-dependence, it only means you will extract it, squeeze it from the students. So that means the fees of education has to be hiked. And that is what we see. And government continues, this is another recommendation. Government continues to fund disciplines like archaeology, religious studies, and philosophy, while anything that had market value could be taught at private universities. And this is a report, a recommendation that was given in 2000 by a committee headed by Mukesh Ambani and Aditya Birla. And this is a news from 2019. It says that the present government, present ruling dispensation, now favors this Birla Ambani report. So that means now it's a full-fledged commercialization and corporatization of education system. And they're literally coming up with this. In this particular scenario, obviously, we don't expect the government to increase fund. That is why on behalf of the scientific community, we try to get together and raise our voice, because it's our money. And we say that India is sufficiently rich to allocate more fund in education and research. What essentially you need is the pro-people education policy. And that is why we demand allocate at least 10% of central budget and 30% of state budget to education, and spend at least 3% of country's GDP on scientific, technological, and social science research. With this, before I conclude, I would like to show a kind of a statement coming from Leo Tolstoy. And I believe it is kind of a reminder for us. It says that the strength of the government lies in the people's ignorance. And government always opposes true enlightenment. Government, while it is spreading darkness, pretend to be busy with enlightenment of the people. This is what it is. Before I end, I just want to show you these figures, these photos. These are real photos. These are the product, the future that we are creating from this education system. The education system, the scenario is so terrible. There are the school dropouts, the financial crisis on top of that all these small kids are getting lost. Where they are finally precipitating? In this brick field, garbage collector or child labor. So that means if we cannot save education, we cannot save this future too. It is our turn now to save education, which means humanity as a whole. So we have to save this education from peril. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Manabendra Bera, for this interesting talk and sharing with us the bitter facts and figures, highlighting the deteriorating condition of educational institutions from primary to research level in India, and shedding light on funding allocated by the government for the same. We now proceed for the question answer session. Our participants on Zoom, Facebook, and YouTube are requested to write their questions on the chat box. We shall take these questions as we proceed. To conduct this session, I shall invite Dr. Ankita Das and Dr. Komudi Vikas Goswami. Dr. Ankita is currently a postdoctoral research scholar at Glasgow and a member of Breakthrough Science Society abroad chapter. And Dr. Komudi Vikas is also postdoctoral researcher at Raman Research Institute, Bangalore, India, and a member of Breakthrough Science Society abroad chapter. With this, I request Dr. Ankita and Dr. Komudi Vikas to take over. Thank you.
Thank you, Sivi, and thank you so much, Manabendra, for taking out your time and giving this such a detailed, exhaustive, as well as this painful statistics, which really is shocking to all of us, what is happening with the education in our country. So with that, I will now request all of our audience participants to put forward their questions. Either you can directly ask to our speaker, Dr. Bera, or you could write down in your Zoom chat box or from Facebook or YouTube, and we shall be able to put this to our speaker. Now, yeah, please either raise your hand or come forward and ask your questions to our speaker.
Thanks a lot for this wonderful presentation. The data that were shown were very shocking. I just have a small question from the beginning of the slide that we know that the Constitution says that free and compulsory education for all, particularly in the age group 4 to 16. So in this regard, how far has this plan been achieved, do you think? Like, what is the what is the scenario in this regard that the Constitution states this as a fundamental right?
Okay, it's a very good question, obviously. This is exactly the question I'm trying to address. I was trying to address through my presentation. And the picture is not really great. And if you ask me quantitative figures that to what extent government of the system has been successful, then I have to go back to the statistics again. But on the other side, the overall education system, whatever the self-drumming the government is beating, means it's not really true. As we all know, what is the situation of education in government schools? It's terrible. Even a parent having a minimum resource, they don't want to send their kids to the government school. They always look for some private schools having little better education, right? So right to education is just a farce. Just a farce. You cannot talk about right to education at the same time allow the schools to increase the price of education or fees of education. Given that the government has all the information about the financial capabilities of its people. It's just a slogan, void slogan. I think that is probably the answer in one sentence. And how much government, or let's say so far various governments, contributed to upliftment of this education and the education of the people, I think that already I have shown in the figures. Like you look at the school dropouts. Till college, 73% drops out. Will you call it a success of the education? And when we are talking about, we are talking in a century, 21st century, where we think of sending people in the Mars, right? So that already tells you. It's no way desirable something, no way something you expect this government to really shy away or ignore. Kaustubh, did you get the point? The quantitative answer obviously is there in the presentation. Is the qualitative answer.
Yeah. Thanks a lot. Yeah.
Thank you, Manavda. So next, I can see PB Kumar raised his hand. Can you please come forward and ask your question to our speaker?
I
Hi.
will be able to do just audio if it's all right. I've also placed my question in the chat.
Okay. So, okay. So is it okay if I ask your question on behalf of you?
Certainly, you can proceed with that. And if there's anything else, if I want to add, I'll just add on.
Okay, sure.
Okay, I think
so,
please go ahead.
Yeah, Manavda, you can also read.
So the question, if I see correctly, what can we do when people insist on remaining ignorant and resist reality, sometimes violently? See, the point is that most of the cases, these people, they are ignorant because they don't understand the gravity of the problem. And it is always the responsibility of the people who understands the gravity of the problem and to convey this gravity to others. So that means the task is on us. Whatever the way, however the means you may have, means whatever the situation you have, the strength, the capacity you have to go out to the people and say that this is the reality. Don't close your eye. Because if you want to destroy a generation, you don't have to do much. Just destroy the education system. And that is what exactly is happening. That is exactly is happening. We have students passing out from colleges in science institutes, and we see they're extremely superstitious. You see. And when a person is superstitious, it's not just that he is affecting his own life. He's affecting the entire surroundings that he is living, the society itself. So it is our responsibility. Obviously, people may get violent, but again, this violence possibly is the outcome of this bad education system itself. Why people get violent? Because
Probably because they feel disenfranchised some way.
correct, or they don't want to argue in a logical way. That means their scientific bent of mind, logical bent of mind is poor. And again, this is a result of this education system at the end of the day. So my point
I
is,
may
it is
add if
our
I'm-
task.
Yes, sorry.
It's our task.
Yeah, certainly. I agree with you, Doctor. Like you mentioned, there's people who are passing out of premier scientific
Yes.
institute. I mean, after spending years of work, working on some really important concepts about nature, and they still, are attached to those superstitious beliefs. I was just wanted to know how you can actually work through. What can you possibly say when such people are, just continue to be as they are, and they insist on, on an emotional connect with a past or something like that, even after going through what everything, I mean, seeing everything with their own eyes and even working on them. So it's just how do you overcome such contradictions in the,
So
the cognitive
I
dissonance?
see there are two ways to face this thing. First, at least the people who already get to understand the problem of this education, particularly the science education, they should raise their voice. They join more in numbers to this March for Science movement in particular, or wherever it's possible, at least some science activities that are taken up by breakthrough-like organizations. This is the first thing. Second thing, it is our responsibility also to come up with an alternate science education, because we know this education system, because of this vested interest of this corporation, it cannot perform the way it should. It cannot really, in true sense, bring science education in the schools. We know that. So it is our responsibility. In a sense, we, based on our capacity, should come up with some initiative for a new science education in true sense. On the other side, bring more and more people to this March for Science like movements, so that they also get concerned and participate in this process. These two, for me, I see. Because I as you see from this presentation, that however cry you may have, the government is not going to listen, right? It's a blueprint they have to privatize it completely. I don't know, Mr. Kumar, if it answers your questions. So these are the two things to say.
Yeah, thank
Thank you for your
you.
time, Doctor.
Previously, Shrobana already has put forward her question. So before going to Devashish, Shrobana, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah. Can you please ask your question directly to our speaker?
Yeah. So my question is, in higher educational institutes, usually this knowledge generation is lacking quite a lot. Okay. So what do you think that what steps should be taken to tackle this problem by the administration or bureaucratic committee?
See, it's a very good question, Shrobana. Thank you for that. But see, whenever we talk about research, particularly knowledge generation, there are multiple parameters.
Yes.
One
Okay.
obviously is the bureaucracy.
Okay.
Another is obviously the funding. And the third, possibly the most important point, I think you are pointing to, is the culture, research culture. In India, culturally, we are more comfortable to follow than contradict. Guruvadi mindset. Culturally.
Okay.
So that is why, to challenge something directly, see, I say there are exceptions. Obviously, in India, we see great scientists over the ages, but they're exception. But in general, if you look, we rather try to follow, or at most contribute to incremental research, where you don't have to contradict or come up with a very radical new concept. And so it's a culture, obviously. And on the other side, if you look in our education system, as I was mentioning, that we don't have logical mindset, or let's say we don't inculcate logical mindset or questioning mindset in the schools. So that immediately tells you that means culturally we are more prone to accept than question. It's a culture. And on top of that, this funding, research requires funding.
Yeah.
Without funding, you cannot go for research. And administration too. If you think in this way, let's say a research laboratory is running, but the head of the research laboratory doesn't know anything about how research works. Maybe some, IAS or IPS officers. They don't have any idea about how research goes. And many of the cases, they just look research as like any other jobs, and they treat also in that way. So apart from that, there are many other things, as I think CB at the very beginning mentioned. There are no equitable distribution of fund and etc. etc. But when there is very little fund, the question of equitable or not, it's a separate issue. It doesn't make sense much. You need to have fund first to talk about equitable distribution, right?
Yeah. So you are saying that increasing the fund is one of the main
Absolutely.
steps.
Absolutely. And also this culture.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Sravana. Thank you, Dr. Bera. Next, Debasis, can you unmute yourself and ask?
Yeah. So my question is, as it shows in the ASA report that since from 2005, 50% of children in class 5 in rural school cannot read and write or do arithmetic in class 2 levels. And that essentially they haven't acquired any basic skill and then drop out. So as the result, they can only get manual jobs that pay little. Absolutely. And they will remain poor during their lifetime. So
this is absolutely true.
Yeah. So my question is how to get out from this situation.
This is a good question. As you remember, while I was ending my seminar, I pointed to these child laborers. No, this is exactly.
Yeah.
The education system has been molded in such a way so that the majority of the people, although they will get out of the schools, they will not acquire any skill, a good skill, to get absorbed in the labor market. On top of that, the job openings in today's time is really little. Let me tell you one very interesting thing. It has been told in a TV interview by a person called C.D. Deshmukh. At that time, it's something around in 1960s or 68, I don't remember correctly. Dr. Deshmukh was actually the chairman of UGC, and he was asked that why we kind of see a trend that there is more fees for higher education. Over the year, the price is also increasing. And he mentioned one thing, saying that, see, there is unemployment problem in the country. That means you don't have jobs. The number of students, number of people that are getting out of the school, they are not getting jobs. He says that, yes, unemployment is a problem, but educated unemployed is a bigger problem. Because they have some quality of thinking, questioning. This is much more troublesome than a section. They are unemployed, but don't have this capability of thinking, questioning. And now you see it. They will prepare, they will actually make you paralyzed in such a way that although you are educated, but you have no capability, both in your thinking and also in your, let's say, job training or anything, so that you can be absorbed in something. This is what exactly is going on. Devasis. Does it answer your question? And if you say this is a problem, see, this is a problem of the level of a nation, a country. Individual initiative may help individuals here and there, But on the national level, if you want to do something, you need movements like March for Science. You have no other choice. You need more people to come forward, join in. Devashish, did it answer your question?
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Devashish. Next, Ankit, can you please unmute and ask your question?
Hi, Manabendra. Nice talk. Well, the figures were a bit too much data and it was too much to understand. But I want to ask one thing which I haven't heard is about RTEF 2009, which basically gives the government a kind of mandatory instruction that they have to enroll 25% students from poor section into private schools so that people can be on the same level. So how far is this have been achieved, and then what is your take on this?
Yeah,
Thank
so the point is that overall burden, it's a very good point, Ankit, you have raised. You may enroll some poor section in your school, but overall the expenditure does not go down by that, because the private schools requires a lot of other costs, right? They have different activities, different fee structure, and so on and so forth. So what I wanted to say, at the end of the day, you may increase some students coming from this poor section to the private schools, but that overall does not going to change much. My point is that they will still suffer from this financial pressure, because the private schools are often very much costly. I think that is what you are talking, no? That whether it's going to help or something.
No, I'm not talking about whether the private going student from government to private will help or not. It is like the government took decision that they will sponsor 25% of the people from poor section of who will enroll in private schools, and it has been
Okay,
mandated
that is recently
by
to
RTE
Haryana.
Act. Yeah, this
This
was
is-
a kind of mandatory information from the court as well. So I wanted to know that, is it being imposed? How good is it going? Because it was supposed to
My
strengthen.
overall impression, I have to look at it in order to really give a good answer, obviously. But my overall impression is that instead of doing that, if government could have done the same for the government school, they say that, well, that many students, if you can enroll, I will help you build your infrastructure, having a better education. Because this is just an incentive to the corporate and incentive to the people, so that overall education system becomes private in long run. Government could have done the opposite, right? You see, for a government, it is not really a big thing. It just has to instruct something saying that all government employees, be it a teacher or any government office, are bound to enroll their kids in government schools. Just do that. All these administrative problems even we are talking about will majorly, at least in the primary, the school level education, will go away. They don't do that because that is contrary to the interest of the corporate, and interest of the corporate matters a lot for the government because they fund. Ankit, did it answer at least this partial thing? In my opinion, it's not going to help. It only helped to privatize the education only. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ankit. Next, I will request Siva. He has put his question long back in the chat box. Siva, can you please ask the question to our speaker?
Yeah. Hi, Dr. Bera. So I have, first of all, very nice presentation. And I have two questions. First of all, how much do you think the data that was presented for school education is reliable? Because many schools, they do not give away data. So the data could be better or worse. The second question is that many students who go out of the country, they do state-of-the-art research, but the research quality in India is not so novel. So what could be the reason for this particular issue?
Okay. So for the first question, the data that are literally reliable, it is by government institutions. For example, the bodies like UDID, bodies like ASER, or what I was showing. These are all government bodies. And government has unified data registering system for education. Okay, so these are all reliable data. It is coming from government website. Now, if you say that, well, government website may be forced, it's a different question. But remember, at least the trend we see, government always try to hide their loopholes, their wrongdoings, no? So if this is the case, whatever the figure and facts that I have shown, that are like better one, that means the situation is even worse. You can think in that way. Shiva,
Yeah,
you got the first, the answer to the first question, no?
Yeah, I was not trying to say that the data is not coming out from the government, but the institutes themselves then do not put the correct information.
In
Try to hide.
general, when you go for the statistical analysis of data, 1, 2 data point, 10 data points that are not going to change the overall conclusion that much. And I don't think there is a data forging on that large scale, because there are data coming from state government, central government, and so on and so forth. And there are conflict of interest also. So there has to be certain form of objectivity. Okay.
Yeah.
And for the second question, that why many students from India who go out and study abroad do better research. Again, there are three things if you take it, it's like at the face value itself. One is culture. Research culture is different. The kind of question you address, the challenge that you take up, the environment you are put in, where you literally have, scientific ambience for discussion, debate, and so is very much different. This is first. Second, having more funding. Funding is essential. In today's time, without funding, you cannot even think about cutting-edge research. More challenging question you ask requires more technologically better instruments. That means costly instruments. Third is administration, obviously. Okay, so I think these three, in that sense, if you look at, on an average, they are better abroad. Obviously, when I say abroad, only some countries that are doing good in research, not every country. Okay, like US, Germany, France, Italy, UK, countries like this. Shiva.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you, Shiva, for your questions. Next, I will go to Chandrima. Chandrima, please, can you?
Yeah. Yes. So we can see that the current government is trying to privatize the entire education system. And at the same time, more than 90% of the people of our country, their monthly income is less than 10,000 rupees. So what is your opinion on this privatization of education?
Well, this is as simple as it is. They don't want common people to get educated. They want, on the other side, to have a degree. That is why there is no pass-fail in right to education. That till class 8, or even in many states till class 10, you don't have to even appear for exam. So that in pen and paper you are educated. Government completes its responsibility by saying that, see, my citizens are already having a degree, but they are useless. In what sense? This education does not impart or does not help in any sense for their future search for job or livelihood. So government just simply does not want its people to get educated. As simple as it is. Just look at the quotation that I had mentioned coming from Leo Tolstoy. The strength of a government lies in the ignorance of the people. That is what it is. This is first. Second, there is a middle class. And in this middle class section, obviously, at least whatever the number it may be, given the population we have, 1.3 billion, this number is still not small. And the private education industry essentially look for them. And there is a saying, it says that if a parent is there who is not very well off in a sense, like does not earn that much money, but still can have some minimum amount. In this situation, he will curtail down his monthly expenditure, but put his kid or her kid to a private school. This is a mentality, and obviously rightly it is there, because every parent, they want their kid to get good education, and for that if they need to compromise, they will. And that is how this private education industry is booming. It will saturate also at some moment, and I think it's already, we are seeing it, at least in private engineering colleges, that we are seeing. So to answer your question, privatization of education, in any case, the 94% people who are having less than 10,000 rupees a month, they are not contributing at large scale to the private education industry, because they don't have that much money to afford a private school. And for them, they will be denied education. Government just does not want them to get educated. As simple as it is. Chandrima. I don't know, did I answer your question?
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you, Chandrima. Thank you, Dr. Bera. I think last question we are going to take from Moinak, and with that we are going to close our question answer session. Moinak, can you please ask the question?
Hi, that was a fascinating talk, Manuda. So this is more of a comment than a question. So in the mainstream media, there have been many talk shows and everything happening, but we barely see any discussions on education and research. And so if you like to comment on that,
Oh,
so
yes.
the role of the mainstream media.
Obviously, in a country like us, where majority of the economy, including the government, is controlled by the corporates, you don't expect this media, the news media, print media, whatever you have, to act against the interest of the corporates. They don't talk about not just education and research, even the real burning issues like poverty, the skyrocket, that means what I wanted to say is the price hike of daily commodities, right? You hardly see them. So here what I wanted to say is that not only that the media do not talk about education, research, funding, and so on the opposite, they try to make up a sentiment saying that private institutions are better than the government one everywhere. This is essentially a sentiment they want to create in people, saying that, oh, this private government office, they don't work. These offices should be made privatized, then they will work. So this is a sentiment essentially they create. Although they never talk about saying that, well, that means why don't we privatize the parliament itself? They don't talk, because that much need they have. It's a different question though, but Moinak, you understand. So obviously they not only, because they always work in favor of the interest of the corporate, and here raising these core issues related to education, particularly the sorry state of affairs, is not favorable. Instead, they will rather say that it is because of the government teachers, it is because of the government infrastructure, the education is bad, or this education is suffering from inside. So let us privatize it. That is what is happening also. Even if they have discussion, they will have discussion only in this form. So media, along with the government, are essentially playing the same role, so that education is privatized more and more in the coming days. Moinak, you got the point, no?
Yeah. even in the internet, like in the alternate media these days, we have seen a boom in like the coaching institute and those
Correct.
like the coaching entrepreneurs, and
Correct.
they are just promoting not exactly science, but they're promoting the business.
Correct. Correct. It's just a private, it's a called private education industry. It's an industry now.
So thank you, Dr. Bera, and thank you, Moinak. So with that, we are now closing the question answer session, and we are really sorry if we are not being able to take up all the questions from you, but I believe we will be able to discuss more with Dr. Bera in future time. In any platform you want to, you can email him or you can ask him through our Facebook page. With that, we thank all of our participants for these nice questions and this interactive session, and also we thank very much to our speaker today. With this, I now invite Ipsita to conclude the program. Ipsita is currently a PhD research scholar at ICFO Barcelona, Spain, and she is a member of Breakthrough Science Society Abroad chapter. Over to you, Ipsita.
Thank you, Ankita. With that, I want to thank our speaker, Dr. Manabendra Bera, for taking out his time today and presenting this unfortunate and shocking statistics of the funding in research and science in India. I also thank all of our audience for participating in this interactive session. We hope that we have learned a lot today and spread this knowledge to others so that more and more people, either directly or indirectly related to science and education, get to know about these facts and statistics. Apart from this, I would also like to appeal to all of our audience to become a part of our efforts to save science, education, research, and scientific temperament in Indian society today by becoming a part of India March for Science. All the details on how to join IMFS are available on our website. Once again, on behalf of India March for Science, I thank our speaker today, our audience, and our organizers for making this discussion successful. With this, we close today's program. Thank you very much, all of you.
Thank you so much.